Hi there, and welcome to another episode of African Business Stories. Africa is the only region in the world where more women than men choose to be entrepreneurs. What this says to me is that the story of business in Africa is the story of the African businesswoman. So we're on a journey of discovery to find these women and tell their stories. On the show, we will hear from female innovators and entrepreneurs building and running businesses in Africa. They will share the highs and lows of their entrepreneurial journey and lessons learned along the way. Some of these women you may know, and many you may not, but I assure you that all their stories are inspiring in their own right. My hope is that these stories will inspire you to reach for your dreams and leave a legacy for generations to come. It makes such a big difference to us if you can rate, review, and share our episodes. You can do this mainly on Apple Podcasts, and you can find us on all podcast platforms. If you're in Africa, Spotify is now available, so check us out there. And don't forget to rate, review, and share. On the show today, I chat with Ndia Magadagela, co-founder of Everlectric, an electric vehicles as a service business focused on driving the logistics industry in South Africa. We talk about the impact of being raised by entrepreneurial parents, the calculated steps she took into entrepreneurship, the value of having co founders, intentionally looking for opportunities, and landing on the idea of electric vehicles as a service. She explained to me what it was like being first to market in the EV space and trying to raise money and educate the market all at the same time. Thank you to the team at Presidential Precinct for the introduction and for all you do to empower African entrepreneurs. Let's get into it. Welcome to African Business Stories.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Akiego, for having me.
Awesome. I just wanted to start real quick to get to know you a little bit before we jump into your business. And I read that you're from the Limpopo province, which is like the northern part of South Africa. And I read that it's such a beautiful place. And some people have called it the Africa's Eden. And so I wonder what it was like for you growing up in such a beautiful, picturesque place.
I really do come from a beautiful part of South Africa. It is the far north of the country, a province called Limpopo, also known as Africa's Eden. It really is the home of the Kruger National Park, which is one of the biggest parks in the world. We've got the Big Five there, so we've got a lot of tourists that come to the province. But I particularly grew up in a village called Hamashamba, and I remember just growing up on the dusty streets, playing in the streets, and being a very happy child. Being the youngest of five children, I had an amazing upbringing. I actually went to school in that village until I was in grade seven, which is like the last year of primary school. So high school is what I did in a boarding school in Pretoria. But an awesome, awesome upbringing in the village.
I read that both your parents were professionals and they both then became entrepreneurs. And I wonder what memories you have from growing up and, seeing them become entrepreneurs and if that had any impact at all on your life choices.
Yes, most definitely. So my dad was actually a health inspector. My mom was a nurse, and actually, when we were younger, my mom was stationed at a clinic in the village. So we actually did live at the clinic, and then at some point, my dad. Apparently, as the story goes, my dad presented the idea of starting a business to my mom. We were five kids, and my dad always felt that at some point in his life he would be an entrepreneur, and he felt that at that time it was the right time. And it was actually my mom who stopped working first and went to start the business. And my dad later joined. I think it must have been a year or so later. It
Mm,
had a very powerful impact on me, the fact that my parents were entrepreneurs, because it actually happened very, very early on in my life. And so that was the only life that I knew. It had the impact of, we were brought up sort of helping out in the business. We would come back from school, you would do your homework, and literally you would go help out in the store, whether it was manning the cash register, or, one of my sisters was always responsible for the accounting, and everybody had something to do in that business. So that was kind of the socialization that I had. But also, with my parents starting businesses in the village, and you can imagine,
mm,
this is low income areas. Just for them they were philanthropists. They really were the kind of
mm.
people who were very concerned with the community. And so it was so great growing up with so many other people. Like, my house was
Right.
just full of people, and my parents took care of a lot of people as we were growing up.
Do you know why your parents chose to send you to boarding school, and what was that like for you going all the way to Pretoria?
So, look, I was born in the early 80s. So when I was about to go to high school, it was just after 1994, which is when South Africa got our independence. And so the local schools, my parents felt that they wanted to give us what I will term a better education, right? Just because they really just wanted us to have a different life from what they had had.
Mm,
And so when they looked around, there were not a lot of schools in our area that could sort of cater for what they were looking for. And so actually all my siblings went to boarding school. I was
mm.
off to Pretoria, which is about 400 kilometers away from home. And that was at the age of 13. I mean, the
Wow.
first few months were really tough. My older sister, the one that comes just before me, the fourth one of the five, she was in school with me. She's 4 years older, so we were at school at the same time. But it was really tough growing those first few months. But I think it taught me so much about being independent, about
Right.
living with people, about just being, a neighborly neighbor to anybody. I say now that I can live with absolutely anybody because of that experience, and I'm fiercely independent because of it.
I too went to boarding school, so I see a lot of value. I mean, people talk about the downsides of boarding school, but for me and a lot of my friends, I think, the benefits seem to outweigh those challenges. But yes, I agree with you. It does teach you a strong sense of independence.
No,
Yeah.
for sure. And the relationships you make when you're in
Mhm.
boarding school. I mean, I've got friends
Exactly.
that I've known since I was 13, and because we almost like family, because we grew up together literally.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So then you're now in Pretoria, and I guess you decide to stay there and go to university. So talk to us about that, choosing your course and what those years were like at University of Pretoria.
So, I mean, at some point I thought I was going to be a doctor, I was going to study medicine, just because, I don't know, I think everybody, probably most people still kind of think they're going to be doctors and firemen, and then it changes. But because my dad was a business person, I think he exposed us a lot to like entrepreneurship, and also people who were in entrepreneurship. And so I remember my dad introducing me to a chairman of a bank, of a local bank, who served on a board of a bank, and saying, talk to this person. He is an accountant. Ask him what it means. And I had a conversation with the old man, Professor Yoon, and I thought, oh, this, you can be a chartered accountant, whatever that meant. Let me, that's what I want to study. And that's what I went and I studied at the University of Pretoria. I did my undergrad there, my postgraduate there, and I don't regret it. And I stayed in Pretoria even for my first job at Deloitte. Yeah.
you'd caught that entrepreneurial bug early,
Yeah.
right? Because I
Yeah.
hear that you had a side business while you were at university.
Yes, I did. I did. I used to buy and sell like bags and shoes that I would buy downtown and some knockoff big name bags as well. So I did that when I was in varsity. And it
Hmm.
was really, initially it was like to make extra cash, but then I actually realized that I enjoy it.
Hmm.
So, I did have my hand at sort of the entrepreneurship thing even earlier. And since then,
Hmm.
I've actually also run other businesses before I started the ones that I run now.
Talk to us about some of the other things you did in your career before becoming an entrepreneur full time.
Yeah. So after Deloitte, after I'd qualified as a fully fledged qualified accountant, I then went to a local development corporation. So it's called the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa. And my job there was what they called a deal maker, which is basically somebody who receives applications for funding for businesses and does due diligence investigations and presents them to credit committees for a yes or a no. So I really enjoyed that setup. I was there for 7 years,
Wow.
and really what I enjoyed about it is because I was on the other side from entrepreneurs, which is something that I loved. It was hearing those ideas. It was about seeing people kind of come with an idea and we sort of help them raise funding and we see the businesses grow at times to become quite major businesses and major employers of people and also make an impact in the communities where they perform their businesses. So that was, really a meaningful, impactful job. But even when I was there, I was running an events business on the side. I was planning weddings and I was hiring
Wow.
event equipment. And so I always kind of had something going on the side even with that. But that learning out of the development finance institution, I think also gave me a picture of what the funding side, fundraising side of business will look like.
So you've always done business on the side from university and then even while you were working in the corporate space. So what made you feel like you were ready to go all in, and how did you arrive at the what the business idea would be?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So, I think by nature I am risk averse, and I know that business people probably are not supposed to be, but I'm very kind of calculated. I will not just jump into something. So, I knew that someday I will have an idea that would allow me to leave my corporate job. But what actually happened is that while I was still now doing this development finance work, a friend of mine who's now my business partner came to me and said, "But why don't we start a consulting business? We can do management consulting, and you can bring your expertise as somebody who has raised funds or help people raise funds. I can bring my expertise, having been in the consulting space, and we can do this together." And I remember saying to them, "I've been in this job for 7 years. I would like to stop over somewhere and learn another side of fundraising or like um just do something else that would sort of give me a full basket of experience." And so that's
Hmm.
actually, so I didn't leave immediately. I sort of had a plan of at what point I would leave. So I still said I want to go into the mergers and acquisition space, and I want to just understand how that works, because by definition what you're saying we must go into will require us to do some M&A advisory. So then I left the Industrial Development Corporation and I went and I did a job in mergers and acquisitions. I was a principal there, one of the listed insurance companies in South Africa. I stayed there for 2 years. But while I was there, I remember thinking to myself, I'd like to save up a bit before, because I always knew that, after 2 years, like that's for me, that was the time I'd put for myself. I'd like to have saved a bit of
Hmm.
money, and I would like to, for whatever consulting work we go into, to at least be able to pay a part of what I was earning at the time, just so
Right.
that when I go in, it's not with nothing. I was very
Right.
nervous about doing it that way. And so, indeed, 2 years in, I had saved up a little bit. And the consulting business, we had a contract that could at least cover us for a year. And I thought, this is the time. Now we do it. So it was very calculated. I wasn't one of those who kind of thought in 3 months I'm leaving and that's it. We'll see, we'll see what happens. I kind of thought about it quite a bit.
So where does the idea for Everlectric then come from?
So, my business partner Ben is doing his travels. He's learning about Elon Musk at the time. I mean, I'm talking about probably 2017, 2016. I also traveled, and I
Okay.
actually traveled to the States, and I saw electric vehicles at some of these places, and even hybrids. And I remember actually my business partner saying, "But what do you think about electric mobility? What do you think? Do you think this is something that will be a reality for us in South Africa?" And I remember thinking, yeah, I actually saw electric vehicles run in the US. And even in South Africa, we had manufactured our first electric vehicle. It was called the Joule back in the day. So it was just something that
Oh,
was
wow.
starting to kind of, you were hearing it in the news, you were reading about it. And I remember my business partner saying, but what shape or form would it look like in the South African context? And we went through like
Right.
a session of saying, but would we manufacture electric vehicles? And we sort of thought about that. What would that take? And we thought maybe not. What about taking electric vehicles that are already manufactured and testing them in the market and seeing whether they work? And funny enough, we then thought, okay, what is the industry that would be like a low hanging fruit, the first one that we could approach? And we thought the taxi industry. So in South Africa, the taxis that we have are 15 seaters, and they transport probably a majority of the population. So in our mind, we were thinking, if they transport a lot of people and there's a huge volume of these taxis, and then probably that's the industry we should go to first. And then we thought, but also they do a defined number of kilometers because they have the same, they travel the same route. And
Yeah.
electric vehicles at the time were maybe doing 200 kilometers on a charge. Now it's changed and battery technology has really improved. And we thought we are going to transition the taxi industry. That was the first thing we did. I even remember our initial slide decks were about taxi industry. We went everywhere trying to get clients who would transition their taxis to electric, and it was not going right. It wasn't. The taxi industry was not ready at the time. It's funny now in South Africa, they've come out to say they'd like to transition. But the idea really came from what we saw, looking for opportunity. I think that it was really just about looking out for opportunity, and for some
Hmm.
reason when you start thinking about something you start to see a lot of it. So because we're
Yeah.
already talking
Yeah.
about electric mobility, we tended to hear a lot about the whole concept. And so the taxi industry didn't take us seriously. We didn't have taxis, electric taxis at the time, 2017, 2018, that we could take to market. And we decided we're going to pivot. And that's how we decided to then go with the logistics industry, which is where we actually function now as a business.
So interesting and very, very fascinating because, sometimes people get stuck on their
Hmm.
idea, but the moment isn't ready for that
Hmm.
idea. Talk to me a little bit more about benefits that you found from having a co-founder, because sometimes it could go either way, with
Hmm.
co-founders.
Yeah, actually, I've heard so many horror stories about people that try to form a partnership, and I'm always so grateful that I actually met partners that, we've got the same goals, we've got the same values, and we're very clear about, we respect each other, we are clear about who has to do what, our responsibilities. But now,
Right.
actually, looking back, even at the ideation stage. I think it really helped that we had differing views at the table, right? It really helped that
Mm.
we could lean on each other for ideas, but we could also kind of divide and conquer, right? Even then. And I say we pivoted from taxi to the logistics industry so flippantly and easily now, but it wasn't that easy. You can imagine we've put in the
Right.
time. We've told our families that we are going for the taxi industry, and then the next day you kind of like
Right.
have to, unscramble that egg and start back, from go back to the drawing board. But really having partners has been so beneficial, even like from ideation to when we even were starting out looking for seed funding. The ups and the downs of business, really it helps to lean on each other. There are times when I'm like
Mm.
completely tired and I'm like, I can't, why are we even doing this? And there are times when I'm feeling very strong and my business partners can lean on me for that motivation. But also we are able to divide the work. We are able to kind of run in different directions, come back and have worked on things. But I think the most important thing is the mutual respect, is
Yeah.
the understanding of the strength. And I see it more even now because I think we are growing up together in business. We understand each other's strengths, so we let the one who's great at selling is selling, and
Go sell.
you go forth and sell, and the one who's good with PR does it, the one who fundraises, and I'm not saying that we leave all the responsibilities to that person, but we know that they lead that function. Even if I do go out and sell, I know that my business partner is like the salesperson, and we support him and we
Mm.
support each other. And so far so good. And it's funny, Akiego, we had a fourth partner at some point, right at the beginning,
Hmm.
who we started out with, but our interests were not aligned, and they felt that they needed to do something else. It remains peaceful, but it was clear from they realized early on that this is not something that they wanted to do, and they exited. And looking back, I'm
Right.
like, you know what? We learned a lesson from that, and I think maybe that is what made our relationship even stronger as partners.
Fantastic.
And I don't always like my partners. I don't always like them. Sometimes,
but but there's mutual
yes,
respect.
there's mutual respect. Sometimes, you want to
Yes.
box each other in the boardroom, but you get out and you're friends again, and
Right.
you can be happy
Yeah.
again. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So now tell us about Everlectric.
Yes, our baby. So Everlectric is
Yeah.
a South African incorporated company. We lease electric vehicles to the logistics industry. So I say to people, we are an electric vehicle as a service business. We lease electric vehicles. We couple that with chargers. So we will put down chargers for our clients who would be players in the logistics industry, and we also maintain the vehicles, and we provide them also with a connected back end and a driver facing app, just to give them a user experience that takes the headache out of the adoption of electric mobility. And I mean, there's many
Mm.
reasons why we have decided to do it that way, but the main one is just looking at where South Africa is in terms of the adoption of electric vehicles, the policy landscape as it relates to electric vehicles. It just makes sense for us in the geography where we started to do it in that way. South Africa is still
Mm.
quite it's still a uh, developing policies around electric mobility or even greener mobility. They still charging exorbitant import duties on electric vehicles. There's power issues that we can talk about. So it was important that if we want our client to transition their fleet to electric, we need to provide them with a fail-proof way to do so. And this is exactly it. Yeah.
Interesting. So you went into this knowing the challenges that
Oh,
existed
yes.
already on the ground, but you still chose to go in.
Yes.
It sounds like you built with these issues in mind? What has adoption been like
Yeah.
in South Africa?
Very good question, Akiego. So, I mean, people talk about you know, coming up with your minimum viable product and like finding what your client is looking for and then selling that product. This was exactly that, right? Because, you know, people will create a product that nobody needs because they just think it's such a great product. This was exactly what
Right.
our customer in South Africa needs for what the landscape looks like. So we actually created this product with that in mind. So what problems were we trying to solve? Firstly, the high import duties. If you say to a fleet manager who's my prospective client, go and buy an electric vehicle, which will cost you 40% more than a normal vehicle that you would have used, they're going to say no, but you know, what is in it for me? And so, because of that, then we bought the electric vehicles, put them on our balance sheet, and leased them as a service to the client. But okay, so that took care of the vehicle. So now the question would be, but where am I going to charge this vehicle? What about the infrastructure? Yes, South Africa charging infrastructure is really increasing in number now, you know, in later days. But when we were starting out, there were not that many. And so we decided that we're going to put down charging infrastructure for our clients, but it will be charging infrastructure that will be used by our clients first, and then other people can also use the charging infrastructure. So we put down charging infrastructure because our client, in order for them to adopt, your question about adoption, they needed to ensure
Mm,
that they've got a reliable vehicle they can also charge. And then there was the issue of, but what about load shedding? What about if there's a power issue? And that's when we sort of
mm,
created an intelligence around about around charging. So we are live in our vehicles, in our chargers. The blackouts in South Africa, or you know what they call load shedding, they are scheduled. So you do know, you even have an app that will tell you you won't have power between time this and this time. We've incorporated that into our app or into our back end, where the client knows that in your area you're going to have load shedding at this time, and therefore it's wise to charge either before or after. The We also are able to sort of early warn our users, our clients, that um, you are running out of range, you're not going to be okay for the day, therefore go to this charger, it's open, it's in this area, it's these number of
wow.
kilometers away from you. So really it was just the fact that business people, entrepreneurs exist to solve a problem. And if there wasn't a
Mm,
problem, there would be nothing to solve. And so, even with the challenges, we kind of thought, how do you build your solution in such a way that
mm.
there's no headache for the client? You'd rather worry about it, but give them a seamless service. Yeah.
So I know that Woolworths was one of your
Yeah.
first clients, and congratulations on them because they're a huge, huge South African brand. What has it been like onboarding other clients in South Africa?
Yeah, so Woolworths was one of our first clients, and DSV, Woolworths and DSV, which is the Danish delivery company.
Okay.
And it wasn't that, you know, on day one they decided to go electric. We first ran a proof of concept with them for 2 years, 24
Okay.
months. We ran two vehicles in their
Wow.
fleet to just
24 months,
24
two
months.
vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, patience is key if you're going
Wow.
to be an entrepreneur,
Yes.
clearly. We ran for 24 months. And I think they really provided us an opportunity to even refine our service offering, to see that it works on a small scale. And even though, you know, 2 years might feel like it's a long time, but that proof of concept is actually what has moved them from just being a proof of concept client to being, you know, one of the clients that we've scaled quite a lot with. I mean, they're running their entire online deliveries with electric vehicles that we have provided. Yes,
Really?
so in the Joburg
Congratulations.
and Cape Town areas, right? So, and they're growing into other major metros in South Africa. And so, you know, that proof of concept helped them to sort of decide, okay, we can move from the two vehicles to 40 or whatever, or however the
Mm.
number. But what that also gave us was the confidence that we can replicate the solutions into other fleets. It also gave the market confidence that,
Yes.
because now they see our names kind of, our name kind of moving around in their areas. So since then we have signed up the likes of FedEx. We've signed in South Africa. We've signed up the likes of Nightwing. We have signed up some of the solar installers and guys that run actual solar farms, because you can imagine they would like their carbon emissions to be kept at the lowest possible.
Mm.
We've signed up companies in the pharmaceutical industry as well. We've signed up telecommunications as well. Vodacom has purchased a
Fantastic.
vehicle from us. So you can see that, the clients are coming, and I can really attribute it to the fact that we kind of had that initial testing and that initial big
Mm.
brand that sort of said, we believe in your solution. And I mean, people don't do these things only out of the goodness of their heart. It's
No.
really about customer service, and it's also about the fact that we are meeting the need. So I would like to believe that we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you are. You are. So going back to your initial work that you were doing and how that relates now, I always like to ask my founders about access to finance and funding. You're in a totally different place today from where you started, but what was it like in the beginning, accessing funding with all these challenges you're building for a first to market product? And in a market that didn't really understand what electric vehicles as a service
Mm.
was.
Yeah, it was not easy, honestly, Akiko, starting out. And you can imagine I was starry-eyed thinking I've been in funding all my life, so it should go like that. It should be easy.
Right.
And it was a nice wake up call. I remember trying to raise from a PowerPoint presentation and an Excel spreadsheet, like literally with no vehicle in hand, kind of saying, this is what we are going to bring, give us a chance. And give us the money. And we got a lot of no's. I tell people when they ask that I used to keep a folder of companies or funders that we would speak to. This is commercial banks and development finance institutions, venture capital, private equity, friends and family, and everybody. And I
Wow.
think I stopped counting at 26. That's like how many no's we got initially. And
Hmm.
at that point we had put in our own money. You've put on your life savings, you're showing the skin in the game. But after talking to a couple of people, there was a funder or family office that believed in our offering, and they funded us for the first time for the seed financing, together
Okay.
with our own contribution as the founders, and they put in the money. But then something that I think really switched the funding conversation was that whole 24 months of a proof of concept, right? So,
Right.
as much as I
Right.
say, you would think 24 months is a long time, but that actually proved to, there's nothing like data. People could see that actually this
Yes.
thing has run. We were showing them we have done X number of kilometers. You can speak to our clients, because at that point we have formed a relationship with our client. At that time it was Woolworths, but there was another client as well that ran a proof of concept. But we also had one vehicle that we ran 10-day proof of concept with anybody for free. If you came to us and you were like,
Wow.
you want to test this out, we would give you the vehicle for 10 days, and we would present back to you what we saw in terms of the data. And so that was our selling before we could get the funding. After that proof of
Hmm.
concept with the data, with some clients that had sort of said, we are signing on the dotted line, we need X number of vehicles, that's when funding conversations became a little bit easier. So I think what I would
Right.
say is, for as much as you can test out something and have real data, it is much easier to raise funding than when you are sort of selling it out of an Excel spreadsheet and a PowerPoint
Mm,
presentation. And I know that, I mean, it depends what kind of business somebody is in, but if it is at all possible, rather have something to show for it. Because it is hard when people don't know what risk they're taking, especially with new
yeah.
technologies like these.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that. So, just more broadly, I know that South Africa is one of the few countries on the continent where cars are manufactured. And at the moment, you're bringing in the vehicles you're using for this service. What do you think the landscape looks like for manufacturing electric vehicles in South Africa?
I think the day when we will start manufacturing vehicles in South Africa is electric vehicles, especially is closer than it was like when we
Okay.
started. We are starting
Okay.
to see some policy reform. South African government took out a white paper, which is like a policy paper about, when what the path will be for greening mobility in South Africa. So that came out late last year. There are incentives
Okay.
that they would want to give to manufacturers who will manufacture vehicles, electric vehicles in country. So what it looks like in South Africa right now is that about 70% of our production of vehicles of manufacturers in the country is for the export market. So I think there is an understanding that the export markets, being Europe, they want to move to either electric or greener vehicles, and so there's now starting to be a move to manufacturing locally so that we don't lose the export market, we don't lose that part of GDP, and you can imagine the jobs that come with that.
Hmm.
When we started out, that was not a reality at all. We went to every single manufacturer of vehicles represented in our country, and they didn't see South Africa as a market for electric mobility. So it's another thing about being an entrepreneur that, if there's no like set out silver platter way of saying, things will work, you go and create your
Right.
value, and you create your market. And as we
Hmm.
speak
Hmm.
now, we are starting to see an increase in adoption of electric mobility in South Africa, and we are starting to see the delivery guys like the ones that we speak to, or retailers like Woolworths, or even the solar guys that I was talking about, they are starting to see the efficiencies that come with electric mobility. So it's
Hmm.
sooner
Hmm.
rather than we
Sooner
think.
rather than later.
Yeah.
So, do you have any competition in the market in South Africa?
I think it would be naive to actually think that there is no competition. I think we see parts of it. There's charger installers in South Africa. There are people who are actually leasing electric vehicles, but a different class of electric vehicles who are also putting down charging infrastructure. So, and because the industry is so small, we tend to work with everyone.
Okay.
My vehicles can charge at another charger provider's chargers if I direct my traffic there. So we at this point, I'm seeing greater collaboration between the current players. I think there's an understanding that there's strength in numbers. The pie is big enough, but
Mm,
it's as if now everyone is rallying behind this idea to sort of make it work in the country. There's a lot of lobbying also with
mm,
policymakers. We sit on all those platforms, and it's almost like it's
fantastic.
one of those where everywhere you go you see the same faces, and you know that everyone is
Mm,
this is the industry in one room. We can still fit in one room.
that's fantastic. For
For
now.
now, for
For
now, for
now.
now. Yeah.
What's it like being a female entrepreneur in South Africa, and what kind of support system exists for female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is it's not easy. We're definitely in the minority, and I mean, add being a woman of color, also being an entrepreneur, it's really not easy. But more and more, I'm seeing programs that are really being created to support the female entrepreneurs. And I've been a beneficiary of some of those programs, or even like say industry bodies that tend to want to, help with entrepreneurship. One of them being the Climate Finance Accelerator that I was part of as part of
Mm.
it's part of the UK government. I'm speaking to you now. I'm part of the presidential precinct, which, I'm in the United States at the moment, attending a corporate leaders program, which really strengthens it's entrepreneurs and business leaders in one room kind of talking about what affects us, and those things allow for greater collaboration.
Mm.
Last year, the African Women Chartered Accountants also, honored me with an award in business, and that has also been something that kind of gives you a tap on the shoulder to say,
Right.
well done for how far you've come. Yes, I don't feel like, I feel like we've just started, but honestly, those are some of the things that kind of help you to think, okay, we are on the right track. The industry can see it, our peers can see it. But
Right.
having said that, it is really hard. And I think it does not, the help does not get to everyone. And so, one of the things that is really close to my heart is, how they say, to whom much is given, much is expected. I'm trying to find ways in my little way of being able to replicate that and give it to other women entrepreneurs who might not have the opportunity to sit on some of or to receive some of this support that I might have gotten. I do feel
Mm.
that there's a lot of incubation and support at the early stages, or
Yeah.
but I still feel that there's not enough support in terms of funding. People are still quite risk adverse, especially, I don't know, I mean, in South Africa, for instance, it is hard to kind of be in the middle where you started and you were incubated and supported, and then now you want to grow and nobody wants to take
Yeah.
the risk. And I think that is still a reality,
Mm.
even for me, even for my business.
Looking ahead, what do you think the next 5 years looks like for Everlectric?
I think it looks like growth. It looks like this whole adoption story getting to a wider audience. It looks like delivery fleets kind of, all realizing that this is actually a solution that works. And I see us growing in leaps and bounds, but I also see us sort of backward integrating, and maybe also
Mm.
forward integrating, whatever that will look like, but kind of thinking about the value chain of the business. I think the first step was really to stimulate the market, make sure that this is a solution that works and it makes sense. But now we're starting to think about other parts of electric mobility for South Africa, and even maybe for the continent, where where we
Yeah.
could replicate this. But something that is very close to my heart, and is something that I'm working on now, is just the training of skills in South Africa for when there is
Mm.
adoption of electric mobility. So at first it might be that we would train for our own use, but we would like to be a center of excellence to train skills for the industry as well, just
Mm.
because we are one of the first movers. So that is something that we are working on, to put together a program like that for skills transfer and on the job training for electric mobility.
Yeah, I wish you all the best with that. So, just in wrapping up, I normally ask my guests to reflect a little and give advice. So, just in terms of reflecting, what would you say are some of the most impactful things that you've achieved in building this business in South Africa?
In reflecting, I really wish that I was kinder to myself through the journey. I really think that I didn't stop enough to actually look back and think of how far we had come. I think being a high achiever, I was always kind of saying, I should be here. Why am I still here? And now I stop and reflect quite a lot. I'm really proud of what the team at Everlectric has been able to achieve in a market like South Africa, which we literally were starting from scratch with other industry players, because we were not the only ones. But we are really proud that we can now say that, we've got a fleet of more than 100 vehicles, having started with 0 and then with 5, and then, it keeps going up. And so I look back and I'm really grateful that that was the case. So I think in advice, I would just say, patience, sometimes even the no's can be good for us, because they help us to actually go back and reflect and refine. The fact that the taxi industry never took off is actually something that I'm now grateful for, even though they've come full circle and we can probably service them again. But it helps us to think about the logistics industry as a result. Probably would not have thought about it, or would have thought about it later. But I'm also grateful for the no's, because they've really shaped who we have become.
So, if you could give one piece of advice to other women building businesses in Africa, what would that be?
I would say allow yourself to collaborate more. I would say don't hold on to this and think this is yours and yours alone. You will be amazed at the multiplier effect of having other people at the table kind of helping you with your idea, but also latching on to what other people are doing, because that can just grow your business. So that whole idea of taking out your minimum viable product and talking about it and selling it to whoever is listening, but also collaboration, I would say, is very, very important.
Thank you so much, India. This has been an excellent, excellent conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akigo.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're not already subscribed, please do so on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to leave us a review so we know how we're doing. I'm Akego Okoye, and you have been listening to African Business Stories.